G'day and thanks for joining us for another Australia Talks. I'm DK and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host Ardeet. Today is Thursday, the 21st of May 2026, and our topics this week are 1 in 3 Australian adults are functionally illiterate, which is terrible. And ISIS brides have returned and are continuing to return to Australia. We'll get into that a little bit later. Of course, we've got our Two Ticks Town Talk. Stick around for this week because it's quite interesting. I say that every week, I know, but we'll after that.
They usually are, hopefully.
A little bit biased, perhaps. But then we'll jump into This Week in Australian History and finish off, as always, with the 4X bottle top trivia. But before we get into all of that, we need a little favour from you all. If you enjoy the show, the best thing you can do to help us out is share it with a friend that you think might like it. We'd also be grateful for a review as well. This helps grow the podcast. And, of course, if you like it and they like it, now you got someone else to talk to. So that can be friends. Now, let's catch up in the last week. Ardeet, hello. How's your week gone?
Okay, DK, got my Prado service, my 2010 Prado serviced yesterday. 437,000 Ks I've got on it, and it's still going strong.
Still going strong.
Yeah. So when I bought it in 2019, it had 290,000. So I put a couple of Ks on it since then. Not monstrous amount, but you know it all sort of adds up. But yeah, they just keep going along the Toyotas, and they're not the only one. I mean, there's other cars also that go well, but that thing of just getting the regular service, and when there's something sort of significant that needs to get done, you sort of have to just cop that. But it's part of putting it all together. Like I can't even remember what the I can't even remember the name because I'm not great on those mechanical things, but some arms at the front that had sort of basically had their day, and I can't remember what that was. It was something like
upper control arms, part of the suspension.
Yeah, and they said, well, when you're doing that, you need to get this, that, and done. And I think, I didn't get much change out of 3,000 or something for it. I did speak to a mate who's a mechanic, and he said, yeah, look, whatever the price was, 2 or 3 or something. He said, well, that's pretty much spot on. And it's one of those things if you don't get that, then it creates vibrations and forget the safety things. They all have these flow-on effects. So it's I did look at that and I just thought, gosh, that is a couple of Ks on it, and I thought, I wonder how many it'll be, like how many I'll get out of it. I'm not in any rush to replace it. But I think this is the most Ks on a car I've ever had in my life. But yeah, look, that's good. And she's still good, old Trudy. She's still going well. And then also the other thing, speaking of long distances, tomorrow morning at 8:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time, provided they don't shift it. I'm looking forward to the Starship launch. I really like seeing those Starship launches happening. And look, I know you can, if you miss it, you can see it on the video, and that's fine. I still think that's exciting. But there's something fun about actually being there and watching it live. And this one's a real next step. Bigger booster, the new version of the actual Starship. So I'm a big fan of this pushing the boundaries to get humanity into space. So look, if it's not on tomorrow, they'll push it back. I can't remember what their launch windows are, all the technicals, but yes, I'm looking forward to that. So how about you? What have you been up to? And do the Starship launches do anything for you?
I think it's cool. I love all of those sorts of rocket launches, and I've mentioned a couple of times, we've seen like the Starlink constellations and stuff like that. Can't say I have a huge amount of love for their owner, but the technology itself is pretty cool, right? It's quite a cool spectacle to see. I've been so busy over the last week. I was saying to you just before we started recording, it felt like we were recording like 2 days ago. I can't believe it's Thursday again already. I feel like I've I blinked and this week's just disappeared on me. So the temperature here has dropped though. We're back to, we had a couple of days of really nice warm weather, and now I'm sitting here with a jumper on. I've still got shorts on, mind you, and my slippers on. So this is what we call Queensland winter gear. When I say it's cold, it's under 20, all right? And we're all sitting here shivering. It's really cold when I put long pants on. But I'm hoping for nice dry weather for over the next week would be amazing, because we have had a bit of rain. We've had these scattered showers that are just driving me nuts. It's just been going on for like a month.
Still,
where it's still just
you barely ached about them last week.
Yeah,
and they did sound annoying, but
it just comes over, it dumps its guts, so everything gets absolutely soaked. You'll have like a 10 mil of rain in like 20 minutes, and then it's gone, and it's beautiful for the rest of the day. It's just really frustrating. So I'm still dealing with that. I'm hoping it might hopefully just kind of ease off. But look, we'll see over the next week. We'll see. I'll tell you what though, Prado, 400,000 Ks on that engine. It's probably not even halfway done yet. I think you can put 1 million Ks on those engines as long as you keep them happy, keep them serviced, change the oil, all that stuff. I feel like with a diesel like that, you can't really change the oil soon enough. Really, fresh oil for any diesel engine is just the best thing you can do for them, basically.
Yeah. Because you do your own oil change, don't you?
I do. So I get my car serviced every year with the mechanic, but in between I change my own oil as well. So I normally get 15,000 Ks is when I'll get the mechanic to do it, and then I'll do it at about 7.5 just at home. It costs me probably, I don't know, maybe $100 in oil, something like that. It's not a huge cost, but it's just keeps the machine happy, keeps it running. I've bought my car from new, and I'm up to, I think, 90,000 Ks. So it's still got a lot of life left in it, and I love my car.
I hope so.
Yeah. Oh, it's got a huge amount of life left in it. But I love my car, and it does everything I want it to do. So I'm in no hurry to replace it. And actually, I think I'll probably give it to one of my sons at some point in the future as well. So I plan this vehicle to be in our family for quite a long time. And when I give it to them, I should say I'm not giving it to them. It's still my car. And when they want to get their own car, they'll give it back to me, sort of thing. So
right.
I have a real soft spot for it. Yeah. So I want to make sure it's really well looked after, and any maintenance problems are not going to just I feel like if you've got a car, like the fastest car in the world is a hire car, right? You don't care about what you do. What you do to a hire car, right? This car's not the same. It's very much my baby. I've got to look after it. So.
Yeah, sure. Just before we finish up, what as a non-commercial thing, what do you do with your oil? Because how many liters do you do in the changeover?
So I think my car takes, from memory, I think it's 8.5 or 9 liters of oil.
Right.
So I generally pour it back into the big bottles, and then our local recycling centre, the tip, you can go and take it and drop it off there. It costs you nothing. I think as a ratepayer, I think you can drop off something like 20 litres a month or something like that, and it costs you nothing to get rid of. So I've been doing that, but my neighbor told me keep it because we can use it on some of the fence posts. You basically put a bit of diesel in with it to water it down, and then you paint it on the fence posts.
For
and
termites.
And it keeps the termites away. So I think, and it just makes your fence last way longer. So I think moving forward, we'll keep it all. But in the past, that's what I've been doing. Just taking.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
What are you watering it down with?
Diesel.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
so mix some diesel in with it, and then just slap it on with an old paintbrush, or one that you don't care about, and paint it on there, and the fence posts will go black, and the pests will very much keep away from it. So, if you're in a rural area and you're changing your oil, ask your local landowner because they may want it. A lot of used motor oil is used for stuff like that. So, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
It actually looks not bad either, because then you get these nice black fence posts that I think look quite good. It soaks in, so. All right, let's move on. I can't think of a transition, but more than 1 in 3... More than 1 in 3 Australian adults are functionally illiterate, which is horrendous. Australians spend more money per capita on education than most comparable nations. We should have high levels of literacy, but we don't. NAPLAN results indicate that 1 in 3 primary and secondary school students do not meet basic national standards in reading and writing, and the picture is most likely worse for adults. The most recent data we have is the Organisation for Economic Co-Cooperation and Development's 2013 survey assessing adult competencies. It found 44% of Australian adults had literary skills below the necessary proficiency level for navigating modern work and life. In other words, they were functionally illiterate. If we assume that 44% of Australian adults are still functionally illiterate, which is a fair assumption, this means that there's about 9.4 million people lack the skills needed to meet the demands of everyday life and work in a complex, advanced society. And that, quite frankly, is a national disgrace for such a wealthy country. Functional literacy is now widely considered as a human right around the world. When we think of human rights, of course, we typically think of physical needs such as safe food, water, shelter, and medicine. But meeting these needs is increasingly dependent on the ability to read and write. For instance, through using text-based apps to manage our personal finances, social lives, and learning. Improving functional literacy in adults may be Australia's biggest literacy challenge. In 2021, there was a government inquiry into adult literacy. And responding to the inquiry's list of recommendations, the government outlined a list of initiatives that either already existed or it planned to put in place. Personally speaking, I think maybe we need to bring back those ads for the reading and writing hotline. 1300 655 06. Will be burned into the memory of many Aussies. The Australian government temporarily withdrew from the OECD's most recent literacy study for what they called data security reasons. Instead, they opted to conduct their own survey called the Survey of Adult Skills in Australia. However, that survey has been outsourced to commercial polling company Roy Morgan. The results for that survey are due later this year. Until then, we lack up-to-date estimates of adult functional literacy levels in Australia and the ability to objectively assess if current policies and programs are proving effective. So, what can we do? Short answer is, we don't know how big the problem is right now. But assuming that it is a big problem, it needs a highly effective solution. In principle, the solution should be straightforward. We need to accelerate the delivery of evidence-based informed literacy assessments, explicit instruction, and targeted intervention, primarily for children, teens, and of course, adults across Australia. In practice, though, this solution is far, far more complex. The low-hanging fruit is the children. Ideally, every primary school in Australia would build a multi-tiered system to support literacy. This will ensure that all children receive evidence-informed, explicit instruction in foundational literacy skills, such as phonetics, the ability to translate letters into sounds and decode written words, and morphology, the ability to use the smallest units of meaning within words to read and understand. If a child fails to respond to this instruction, ideally, they should receive additional help in the small groups or individually. And I know this sounds like we should already be doing this, but unfortunately, quite frankly, we aren't. And we don't have the funding in a lot of schools to give these kids these assistance that they need. The same approach should be used by secondary schools to support teens who struggle with functional literacy as well. However, it is a bit more difficult to build a multi-tiered system for literacy in secondary schools, which generally lack the time, expertise, and resources to support the large number of incoming students who need this help. Secondary schools have traditionally been designed to teach subjects such as English or English literature on the assumption that the students that arrive in those classes are already literate. You're not going to teach the basics when you're assuming that they're already far beyond it. When it comes to adult literacy, there isn't a single system in Australia that supports adult learning. Gaps in support for adult literacy are mainly supported by not-for-profit independent organisations which offer tutoring programs, resources, referrals, and professional learning and advocacy. These include a short little list are the Australian Council for Adult Literacy, Adult Learning Australia, the Australian Literacy and Numeracy Foundation, Literacy for Life Foundation, Read and Write Now, and of course, the Reading and Writing Hotline. Links for all of these organisations will be in the show notes if you are interested. But these organisations undoubtedly do a wonderful job with the limited resources they have. It is unlikely that they'll be able to accommodate the needs of potentially millions of adults who are functionally illiterate. And the federal government has now committed to rejoin the OECD's International Literacy Survey held every 10 years. The last one was held in 2023. So as much as the government's going, yeah, we'll join again, it's a bit of a ways before we get the new statistics, though hopefully we will await those results from the Roy Morgan's survey later this year to see how widespread this issue actually is. Until we get that information, that data, it's not a huge amount we can do right now. But Ardeet, I guess the question for you is, are you functionally illiterate? Or do you know someone who in your life that is functionally illiterate?
I'm lucky to be functionally literate. Despite the names that some people may justifiably call me in some situations, but I think that's more to do with my personality than my actual capabilities. Knowing whether someone is functionally illiterate, and look, there's the two words together, functionally illiterate, I think paint probably a worse picture than what a lot of people imagine, because they hear the word illiterate and culturally, at least here in Australia, illiterate implies, you basically can't read or write or do maths, and that's it's almost sort of a slight on intelligence. And I feel like when people hear functionally illiterate's that word that comes out. But really what we're talking about is, obviously there's people who are illiterate and even get to that stage as an adult and do require help. But we're talking about those things of, can you look at a form to fill out for, something official and make sense of it and work out how to navigate through it and how to have like a sort of a basic comprehension of what's being required? Or can you look at, say a financial statement that might be presented to you in a simple format, not for anything super complicated, but think, okay, I can understand the message you're trying to convey. So in terms of that, on the functionally illiterate, I have met a number of people over the years that struggle with that, and people do develop coping mechanisms for it, where they look for ways to hide it, or to get something like, a classic. I've forgotten my glasses. Can you tell me about this? Or something like that. Can you fill that in for me? There can be excuses like that. I have met that. I met people like that, and I'm not really surprised to. I shall take that back. I was a little bit surprised at how high that number was. Where were we? 44% of Australian adults have literacy skills below the necessary proficiency level for navigating modern work and life. I'm surprised that that's high. It's that high, but I would have guessed about 25%. So it is that's 19 points higher. But yeah, I think too it depends how you measure these things. And unfortunately, as you were reading out the commentary from the people involved in that studies and describing it, there were a number of complex ideas and buzzwords around it. There was a couple of times that you said, I thought, well, God, for something like this, you're not sort of putting across a simple message. And sure, they're academically trying to quantify this, but I think there's a lot of self-interest in some of the people reporting as well. So it doesn't matter to me whether it's the 44% or a bit more, or 25% or a bit less. The fact is that we don't appear to be getting value for our money from our education spending, and I think that's a big problem. And whilst I think, whilst I think it's a problem for adults, to me, if you have to be putting money in one way or the other, it has to be in the kids. While the brain's still plastic and malleable, getting those phonetics, getting those morphologies. Now, mates of the podcast know I don't have kids, so I can't sort of talk about the success or otherwise, which you might be able to shed a bit more light on. But that to me is where the best bang for buck is going to be, because so much of the rest of your life and the rest of your education depends on that those basic skills being in there. If you can read reasonably competently and you can have the basics of mathematics, there's a lot you can teach yourself and a lot you can work out. So I think it's probably not going to come as a surprise. I think it's an indictment on the government education system, and obviously I'm not going to be super surprised that we're having these failings. And it appears, since it's been being measured with NAPLAN, that it's been getting steadily, I don't know, steadily or but certainly steadily more ordinary. It certainly hasn't been increasing in a way that people can say, oh, well, we've identified the problem, now we're acting on it. Isn't that great that we're not where we were 30 years ago? We seem to be going backwards or being stagnant. So, yeah, I'm not surprised at the number. I'm not impressed at the current way the education is being measured, and I think kids are really the ones that need to be targeted first off. So what about you? What do you think about it? Were you surprised at the number, and do you have an opinion on which segments should be targeted?
I was incredibly surprised at how high the functionally illiterate rate was. 44% of adults is just disgustingly high. That's far higher than I would have thought. I would have said maybe 1 in 5. I had no idea it was that high. And of course, the reality is that's from 2013. We don't know. It could be higher. It could be lower. I'm doubtful that it is lower. Generally speaking, these sorts of rates don't generally get better without quite significant intervention. I think there is, and you sort of touched on this briefly, there's a bit of a social stigma about this, about feeling as though you are less intelligent because you are functionally illiterate, or you have a low reading level, which isn't true. No. Reading is a skill, and so like all skills, you can work on and get better at. Actually, I know some people that are incredibly stupid. They can read really, really well.
Yeah.
It can go the other way. Though it is rarer, but it does happen. I do know some people that are functionally illiterate. I know some people. I know a couple of people that are basically completely illiterate, and they have jobs, they vote, they go about their lives, and it's, I guess in a way, it's a bit like having a disability in some ways, where you sort of shape your world around it, as opposed to, well, in this case, the beauty is it's something that can be easily fixed. Well, not easily. It's certainly not without effort, but it is something that can be resolved if you want to put the effort in and the time into it. But these people act as though, and I think it comes from like a social stigma and a level of embarrassment is the only way I can look at it that way. Of course, there are things like dyslexia that can impact you and other things as well. So there is some nuance to it, but I think broadly speaking, it comes back to the education system. I think what happens, and I have a little bit of experience in this because my wife's a teacher, that with some of these kids, what happens is there's the education syllabus is so jam-packed that if you start to fall behind with something, the resources just aren't there to catch you up. And you'll just continue to fall behind. And the school will sort of pull you along well enough to the point where you'll probably graduate and they'll get you across the line, but they've done you a serious disservice throughout your schooling, and it's not unique to Australia. This is a problem worldwide, so we can take some solace in that. But I think this is a huge problem that we do need to solve. I'm not really sure what the good solution is outside of just focusing on the kids today and really focusing on it. I love books. I read all the time. Every year I read several novels because I just find it is a really pleasurable way to relax, sit down with a good book. And it's something my mum sort of instilled in me when I was younger, which I'm very grateful for, because I think you can learn so much, but also be so entertained in a way that, like, a good novel is so much more immersive than, say, like a film or something like that. It certainly takes a lot longer to read, but I feel like it's a different experience, but it certainly is incredible.
It's a vastly different experience because it's and yeah, you can have you and I can read the same novel, and we'll have a different imagination of the character. We'll hear different voices of that character. You know, you've probably found that thing. Oh, what did you think that person looked like? And, oh, no, actually, I thought it like that. But the critical thing is, the captivating thing is, it's you in your head with what it means to you, and that's what's so immersive.
And they are, a good author will be open to interpretation and things as well. And I think a good book can leave you sort of changed. They can really open your eyes to certain ideas and things in a way that I don't know that any other medium can quite do the same thing, and be quite as impactful. And I think that's quite special. And the idea that so many people are missing out on that is, I think, a real shame. So I think this is something we really need to take seriously. I don't know how we can help most adults. I think it would really have to come from them wanting to help themselves. So if you're listening to this and you are someone that does have trouble, in my experience, and maybe it's just because I'm a man, but in my experience, I do find it is more often the men as opposed to women that seem to be functionally illiterate. I don't have any stats to back that up. It's just my personal anecdotal experience. But if you are an adult and you are struggling with, reading, understanding, filling out forms, and you really have a hard time do it, I think it's worth reaching out to one of these organizations, because I think you'd realize how quickly you can become much more proficient in this space and how much better your life will be as a result of it. I have known a person who was pretty much completely illiterate and had spoken to, I think it was the TAFE. It was a local organization. It might have been
Okay.
part of a church group or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. But it was like a community organization, and I think they were accredited through the TAFE or something like that, and changed their life. Like they became much more confident, much more able to just function as an adult. They just sort of got their life together a lot more. They hadn't done well in school, and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of that came from there. But I know there's a lot of that sort of story unfortunately isn't that uncommon here in Australia. And if you're listening to this and you know someone, or maybe you are someone that probably needs a bit of help, there's no shame in it. I think it's worth reaching out. I think your future self will thank you for taking the plunge, putting your hand up and saying, I probably need a bit of help in this space, and getting some of that help, because there are those non-profit independent organizations that are absolutely there to help you get you up and running. But
it's a good payback too. It's something that might be a bit of a, whether it's emotionally, psychologically, physiologically, it can be a little bit of a hump to get over. But the thing is,
100%.
You get over that hump, and the rest of your life is all gravy.
That's right. The gift of reading is so powerful, and writing too,
and basic. Mathematical numeracy.
Of course, as well. Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, the one that always sticks in my mind because of the ads when I was younger is the Reading Writing Hotline, 1300 655 but of course, we have listed a bunch of other independent organizations for you in the show notes. So if you are interested, reach out, have a look, and see what they can do for you or the people around you in your community. All right, let's move on. It's time for our Two Ticks Town Talk.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, man. I've breathed the mountain air, man.
All right, this week's Two Ticks Town Talk. We are heading out to sea. There is no town. This is a Two Ticks Island talk. And we're going pretty far from the continent of Australia. And what I want you to do, we're going to head back in time to explain this very unusual, mysterious place. That's right. We are talking about the mystery of Sandy Island, or the French called it Isle de Sable, and the Spanish Isla Arenosa. So on the 14th and the 15th.
Sorry, I was a bit distracted there. What were those names again?
Isle de Sable. Isle de Sable. Isla Arenosa. On you cheeky bugger. On the 14th and 15th of September 1774, Captain James Cook, friend of the show, he charted Sandy Eye, full stop, snaking between latitudes 19 degrees and 20 degrees south, longitudes 163 degrees 50 minutes and 164 degrees 15 minutes east, off the tip of New Caledonia, which isn't Australia. But naturally, this island should be claimed for the British and become part of what is now Australia. He published the associated map and titled Chart of Discoveries Made in the South Pacific Ocean back in 1776. Fast forward pretty much 100 years, the whaling ship Velocity reported the island in 1876. It was noted on various late 19th century maps, including the 1881 German map and an 1895 British Admiralty chart. After returning from the voyage in the Pacific, the Velocity's master reported two unusual features. The first was a series of heavy breakers, being waves breaking on the shore, and the second was some sandy islets or sandy islands. Both then appeared in the Australian Maritime Directory of 1879. It noted, this is the Velocity Masters report, noted that the islets extended north and south along the meridians of 159 degrees 57 minutes east and between latitude 19 degrees at 7 minutes south and 19 degrees 20 minutes south. Now, you will note that those coordinates are significantly different than Captain Cook's, hundreds of kilometers different. It should also be noted that the chart from the Velocity makes a note, which I will read to you now. Quote, "Caution is necessary when navigating among the low-lying islands of the Pacific Ocean. The general details have been correlated from voyages of various navigators extending over a long series of years. The relative position of many dangers may therefore not be exactly given." End quote.
Well, that's useful, isn't it?
So I think at this point, I'm sprinkling clues. I think you probably can understand where this is going. It should be noted that in this time period, it was standard practice for all potential navigational hazards to be listed on such charts as a precaution, even if you are uncertain. Because Sandy Island, Isle de Sable, doesn't exist, and it never has. So, thanks for listening to this week's Two Ticks Town Talk on Sandy Island. Nah, just kidding. So, I can hear what you're thinking. DK, what the hell? What are you talking about? How can we discuss a place that doesn't exist? Well, that is the interesting part of it, quite frankly. Since 1776, we've not confirmed that this place actually does exist until shockingly recently, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Hydrographic charts later placed the internationally recognized abbreviation ED for existence doubtful next to Sandy Island in recognition of subsequent failures to spot the reported island at the expected location. Seafloor mapping in the area by the Australian Hydrographic Service determined a minimum depth for the immediate area around and over the island ranging from 1,488 to 2,353 meters, or 4,882 to 7,720 feet below sea level. So, doubtful that there was ever an island there. Due to the lack of appearance of an island or depths indicating a shallow reef, Sandy Island was removed from official French hydrographic charts by the French Hydrographic Service in 1974.
Are you kidding me?
Yep. And after flying a recognition campaign by the Australian Hydrographic Service in 1975. But this story doesn't end there. You'd think that would put it to bed, but no. The erroneously
You'd think
reported...
that somebody would have sorted it out before then.
This is
That's only 200 bloody years.
It's shocking how long this went on for.
Wow.
So the erroneously reported island persisted because it was included in the World Vector Shoreline Database, a dataset originally developed by the US National Imagery and Mapping Agency, which is now called the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, during the conversion from physical charts to digital formats, and now is used as a standard global coastline dataset. Inconsistencies in this data set in some of the least explored parts of the Earth, mostly due to human digitizing errors or errors in the original maps from which the digitizing took place. What I find interesting is that even Google Maps included Sandy Island, but just as a black void in the map up until November 2012, and there's a specific reason for that, which we'll come to in a minute. How it managed to appear, disappear, and reappear on various maps and charts is a mystery, basically, of the sea, or more correctly, map makers copying each other without actually checking. Sometimes this is deliberate. So some people, map people, you know who you are, would go, ooh. They're called copyright traps. If you break a copyright by copying a map and it has a deliberate error in it, then you must have also copied the error, hence the trap, the obvious tell, and the original map creator can sue you. This was quite common in certain maps, but this is... What is unclear is if Sandy Island was, if ever, a copyright trap. It's never claimed to have been one. Of course, it is possible that it was, and it was forgotten at some point. But I think it should be noted that copyright traps were particularly uncommon on nautical charts. Generally speaking, nautical charts are not copyrighted in the same way, and they generally don't have copyright traps because they're mostly charting hazards as opposed to navigational maps in the sense you would have for land style maps. So there's a bit of a difference there.
Can you just elaborate a bit on that? I don't understand what you're talking about with why you're differentiating between nautical maps and other ones.
So if you were a map maker back in the olden days where you had actual paper maps, it was a lot of effort, a lot of work to make an accurate map of an area. Traditionally, like we're talking, I'm more referring to land-based maps, city maps, those sorts of things. And what was quite common was essentially copyright theft. You'd go out, you'd send your map makers out, they'd spend a lot of time and effort and money making a very accurate map. But of course, a map is a representation of reality, right? So in theory, most of maps of a certain area, let's just say the city of Sydney, for example, most maps of the city of Sydney should be basically the same. So what was quite cheeky and quite common was if you had a high quality map, your counterpart may decide, well, instead of doing the work, we'll just copy their map, because how will they know? And so what you do is you put these little, what we call copyright traps. You'd deliberately make a series of mistakes and you'd hide them in your map that only you knew about. Such things like you might add a street where there isn't one, or you may mislabel a building, or in some cases, you may completely fabricate an entire town.
Right.
Or perhaps an island. And therefore, when someone copied your map, you could point at it and go, haha, you copied my map and I can prove it because that street doesn't exist and I put it in there as a trap to catch people that copy my map. So that's the idea of a copyright trap. The difference between sort of land maps and nautical maps was nautical maps generally didn't do copyright traps in the same way, because nautical maps you were charting hazards as opposed to on land. You're generally not mapping to say like don't go here or don't go here or there's a hazard here and so on and so forth. So, but also nautical maps by their very nature aren't as common. They're not purchased by the lay person, generally speaking, compared to land, road maps and those sorts of things.
So different niche.
Exactly, and there wasn't really the demand.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
And there weren't as many map makers and things like that. So it was a bit different, bit of a different culture there. So generally speaking, copyright traps were pretty rare. It's not that they didn't exist, but they're pretty rare on nautical maps. And as such, I don't think it's fair to claim that Sandy Island was a copyright trap.
Right.
For a bit of fun, people that do like maps, I've included a copy of the 1875 map of the east coast of Australia and the Coral Sea, which you can see Sandy Island noted up in the top right corner. It is the last link on the show notes if you're interested. So, is that the story? Not quite. There might be a genuine answer to this mystery. Pumice, the rock, it's a volcanic rock that is incredibly light and porous, and quite famously, it floats. What's theorized is that the ship Velocity and possibly even Cook himself may have seen a large pumice raft floating in the ocean. Interestingly, a 2024 study of an eruption of a volcano near Tonga found that pumice sea rafts associated with that eruption traveled more than 3,000 kilometers or 1,900 miles westward, and an analysis of the pumice trajectory revealed that the pumice rafts passed within 20 kilometers or 12 miles of the location of where Sandy Island apparently was. And this occurred about 200 days after the eruption. So it did take quite a long time to get there, but we do have evidence that very large piles of pumice, and I have seen these at sea, and they are deceptively look like sand on the water. So
Really? You've seen a pumice island?
Yeah, so it's a huge pile of pumice just floating in the water. And because you get the density is so thick that you can see it. It's just there, and it does. It looks like white sand, like a beach. And some of these pumice rafts can be kilometers, kilometers in size.
Are they solid, or it's just like
No, they're not solid. So it's just like a collection of pumice, and they all just kind of get pushed together like a raft. If you're on a boat, they're not a navigational hazard. I would urge caution, but you can sail through them. The pumice just gets pushed out of the way basically as you go through them. They're a bit of
leaves a nice glow to the keel.
yeah. That's a good way to that was a good way to clean it off. They are quite cool. There are a few videos online of people encountering them in the ocean. So if you haven't seen one, I might put one in the show notes for you so you can have a look at what this would look like. And I genuinely think this is the most grounded explanation for this, that it probably was a pumice raft. They didn't realize that at the time, obviously. Like, I don't think it was a malicious thing. And that was copied. Basically, that chart was copied over and over again, compounding the area right up to the modern day. But there is a final part to this to settle the debate once and for all. In November 2012, scientists from the University of Sydney went to the area and they found only the blue ocean of the Coral Sea. University of Sydney scientist Dr. Maria Seton, who was on the ship, said, quote, "We wanted to check it out because the navigational charts on board the ship showed a water depth of 1,400 meters in that area. That's very deep." End quote. And that settles it. There never was a Sandy Island for Cook to claim, nor any other. It never, ever existed. And it was probably a bunch of rocks floating along, having their merry old time. And thankfully, Google Maps have updated it, and it is no longer there on their charts. So that is the story of Sandy Island, technically a French island that possibly might have ended up becoming part of Australia, that never existed.
Wow. Oh God, that's amazing. I never heard of the pumice islands before, and I get you. I was trying to work out when you first said that. Well, hang on, what's the tie into Australia? And obviously, the tie-in that if it was there, Cook would have claimed it, so it would have been Australian territory. But that's really interesting.
I will admit that is a little bit of a stretch, but I thought, you know what, it's close enough, and I wanted to talk about it. What I've done is I've found a good video. It's from the SBS News, of a pumice raft and people sailing through one. So I'll include that in the show notes. It'll be the second to last one. I'll leave the last one for the 1876 map because it's pretty cool.
Good on you. Interesting.
Bit of a weird one. I like these ones.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. 3 ISIS-linked women have been arrested after arriving back in Australia from Syria, and more are on their way. 6 women, along with their children and grandchildren specifically, they look to leave the squalid camp for families of the former Islamic State fighters in the northeastern Syria, probably within days. The exact timing of the departure is not known yet, with wrangling underway between Kurdish and Syrian officials over the logistics of their travel, including the journey from the Al-Roj camp to Damascus, over 10 hours away, and then onward flights to Australia. Last month, 4 women and 9 children left Al-Roj bound for the Syrian capital. They remained in the city for almost a fortnight before boarding flights to Sydney and Melbourne earlier this month. Upon arrival, the Australian Federal Police arrested and charged 3 of those women. Kawasar Abbas and her daughter Zinab Ahab are facing charges relating to slavery, while members of the so-called Islamic State Caliphate and Jinnah Shafar have been charged with joining a terrorist organization and traveling to a declared conflict zone. All 3 remain in custody. The arrest sparked speculation that the remaining Australians in Al-Judj may reconsider their desire to travel home, knowing that they could face criminal charges. Prime Minister Albanese was asked in an interview yesterday morning if he was aware remaining families were returning to Australia imminently, but he did not confirm the reports. Instead, he reiterated that they would receive no help from the federal government. He says, quote, "The US State Department has been very keen on people leaving those camps. We are not providing any assistance, and I note that the last journey back, we weren't providing any assistance and won't. If there have been any breaches of Australian law, they will face the full force of law, which is what happened to people when they arrived back a couple of weeks ago." End quote. The return of the women has fueled fierce political debate in Australia. Syrian and Kurdish officials continually referred to the rhetoric of Australian government, including the Prime Minister's remarks that he had nothing but contempt for the women involved, to cast doubt on whether they would be allowed into the country. That was despite Mr. Burke effectively conceding that the government had to let them in, given it is their legal obligation to allow citizens to return, and the single-use passports being issued to facilitate their travel. The federal opposition criticised the Albanese government over the issue, accusing it of failing to keep the Australian community safe and demanding new legislation to allow the women and children to be blocked from returning. So, Ardeet, where do you fall on this issue? And I want to ask you, morally, do you think they should be allowed to return? And then legally, should they be allowed to return? I feel like there's 2 sides to this story.
Yeah, look, my very first note to myself was I'm in a quandary about this this one. Do the easy one first, legally. Legally, as Australian citizens, they're entitled to return. Mates of the podcast might remember my opinions on how Julian Assange how poorly he was treated, and my disgust at that. So I legally can't be a hypocrite about that. I think they are entitled as Australian citizens to return. Now, I also do, on the legal side, do agree with, okay, if you're choosing to return and you're Australian citizens, you are under Australian law, and it seemed to me that the decision to arrest a number of them, hasn't gone to court, all those sorts of qualifiers, but the decision to arrest a number of them seemed a reasonable legal decision. So we'll let that process go through. That's the type of country we are, the type of country we want to be, that we do have the innocent till proven guilty. You can't condemn someone until it's been through the process. And obviously I have my opinions about the processes, and sometimes the process is the punishment, but in this case I think it's a case of no, there's a very good argument for it. So look, we'll see what happens further down the track legally. And obviously there was a legal reason not to arrest each of the brides that came back. I'm still a little bit unclear of whether their husbands had died or basically been lost or whatever it was. But that's sort of a little bit of a side thing. And there's also that thing of, well, you can't necessarily blame a spouse, and you certainly can't blame the kids for the decisions of the other spouse or parent. So that's sort of where I stand legally. Morally, I have a much bigger issue with it. I think ISIS itself is demonstrably a monstrous organisation, and I think voluntarily going across to support it as a spouse and a family, to me, personally heavily taints my opinion of you, and this probably I'm not even going to go into the moral. Well, you asked me, so I'll give you my opinion. Morally, I think it's wrong enough that there is a very good cause to say, sorry, but we're not letting you in. Contrast with what I said about legally about the thing, but we're just talking about morally. I think there's enough of a thing up there that, given people who they stop coming into the country for essentially moral reasons, and we're talking about non-Australian citizens who are stopped, there is an analogy there for there for me. My personal feelings is I sort of feel like just you've made your bed, you made the decision, you're going to lie in it, and I don't know if I want somebody who's got the mindset of I'm going to support that type of action. It bothers me what the impact of that might be being let back into the community, and it bothers me the impact of what might be passed on to the children. I know there was that thing of the de-radicalisation program, which, no one's going to be surprised at my lack of belief that a government program is going to magically just click, oh, we've converted the kids, there's no issue there whatsoever. Don't know what the kids have seen, don't know what they've been told, don't know what the continuing education of those kids would be, but I think there is enough of a danger that I would, and this sounds, I'm aware how horrible this sounds coming from me, but I would expect the intelligence services to at least have a flag in there for someone to once a year say, let's just do a double check on how these kids are going. I think that would be prudent. Now, ideally, the kids go through that program. It's all a horrible thing that gets behind them, and they're forthright citizens. That would be ideal. I'd love to hear that. But I think in terms of what is essentially I don't know if you'd say it's a national defence issue, but it's certainly a caution around a potential enemy combatant. There needs to be some prudence applied to that, and the kids are minors, but I think there's enough reason there to keep a little bit more of an eye. I'm not saying constant surveillance, but a double check how these kids going. Oh yeah, reports seem to be they're going okay, and same for the women that have come back who were the ISIS brides. I think a bit of an eye needs to be kept on them, at least for several years, even if it's just let's just check how it goes. Because the bottom line is we're talking about a voluntary association with as I said, a monstrous organisation. Now, if you had someone, what would be a good example, so that it's if you well, let's use a contemporary one, the Russian-Ukraine war. Russia is designated as the enemy combatant. If you had somebody who was, a Russian bride, that to me would be less of an issue than being an ISIS bride, because there's it's a national boundaries thing, and yes, there's a whole lot of complexity with Russia and Ukraine, and there's horrible atrocities gone on there, but it's a different. It's a different mindset. It's a nations fighting rather than a recognised and demonstrable terrorist organisation. And I think that's where the difference is. It's the nature of what they have voluntarily agreed to support that's the problem for me. So that's how I tend to feel about it. As I said, I've got a real quandary about this. What about you? How do you feel about it legally, and how do you feel about it morally? And what's your overall opinion on how these people and the children should be handled?
I feel very strongly, legally speaking, that this is very cut and dry. They have to let them return. They are Australian citizens, and the government, I don't think, should be able to, at its whim, decide that Australian citizens cannot return. This is a slippery slope that I don't think is a good way to go. An example of where this can go wrong. So let's say that so right now, legally speaking, they have to let them come back. There is no legal mechanism for them to deny the return of Australian citizens. If they legislated something to the effect of, in certain special circumstances, we can deny Australian citizens to return home, so on and so forth. When else will that be triggered? We have another global pandemic. Oh, sorry, we're just cutting you loose. There's a disaster or something like that. Nah, we can't have you back. I think that's a slippery slope that I'm not prepared to deal with. And I hope that many politicians feel the same way about that, because I can just see this becoming a real. Imagine if you left Australia. Let's say you were going on a really long holiday, or maybe temporarily relocating overseas, but you always had the intention to return. And when you left, there was an election, and we had a government that was, let's say you'd been critical of in the past. It doesn't matter what party it was. And suddenly they decide anyone that voted against us in the last election cannot return. How would you feel about that? That's a disgusting overreach of political power. And so this is kind of where my mind goes in this respect. I am disgusted by what these women decided to go and do and support. But legally speaking, they should absolutely be allowed to return. And when they get here, we should throw the book at them, lock them up, throw away the key, but we should let them come back. Do I want them in Australia? Absolutely not. No, I do not want them here. But we can't stop them coming home. We shouldn't help them come home, other than really basic thing. And I had a bit of an argument with a friend about what constitutes as help. He was of the opinion that issuing passports to them is help. I disagree. I think that's a process, a service that all citizens have access to, and so I don't really consider that as help. But I don't think we should, there should be no reparation flights. There should be none of that sort of stuff, right? Which is what they're not doing any of that sort of stuff. So morally speaking, it's frankly disgusting what these women supported, just on every level. Should they be allowed to return on moral grounds? Absolutely not. No way. Their husbands are all either dead or in prison, and quite frankly, I think that I would want the Syrian government to effectively lock them up for supporting terrorism, and kind of keep them there for that in that way, rather than facilitating them to get home. I do understand why the Syrian government's like, look, you're not Syrian citizens. You're not, we've got so many of our own problems. We don't need to deal with this. You guys can go home. Two. Yeah, just offload them back to here. So I get that, and I don't blame them for that. So my big problem with this as well is, which you sort of touched on, is the kids. The kids here, you can't tell me those kids aren't radicalized. The stuff they've seen, the stuff they've heard, the stuff that they've been exposed to is nightmare fuel. It's worse than most people can imagine, and that worries me considerably.
I just want to underscore that people do sort of say, oh yeah, how horrible. I would suggest if you have a weak stomach, or you find some concepts of the darker side of humanity a bit difficult, whatever you do, don't look into this any further, because it's really nightmare territory. And when you get into what kids are literally exposed to, and in many cases encouraged to participate in, you just look at it and you think, I don't want anyone who that's their childhood to be in the community. So look, if it's new to you and you've got a strong stomach, and I mean that seriously, if you're mentally strong and emotionally strong and you're curious, have a little bit of a look. If you're not mentally strong and emotionally strong, do yourself. Don't go down that. It's a horrible rabbit hole. But I don't know how those kids, if they've been exposed to the stuff I'm alluding to, don't come back traumatized and broken.
Yeah. It's so. I'm almost like lost for words. Like, it's so disgusting.
Yep.
What these women decided to go and support, and then have children, raise them in that environment thinking, yes, this is the future I want for my kids. And I understand there's an argument to be made that some of them were probably trafficked, but not all of them. And we know that from the fact that some of them were quite vocal supporters of the Islamic State, the Caliphate, and all that kind of stuff. And so the women, as far as I'm concerned, they're basically a lost cause. ASIO better be keeping a very close eye on them, is all I can say. The kids is where I have deep concern for a couple of things. One, of course, they're children. They should never be exposed to this sort of stuff, right? The other one is that the children can potentially be radicalized, and that is concerning. Bringing them back to Australia and letting that sort of hate fester. And I know the Australian government has said that they're going to do de-radicalization programs and things like that. And I really do hope those kids get the support they need. I think they will, because this is such a vocal and high-profile case. I think the government will throw a lot of resources at this. I don't really want to call this assistance or help in any way either, because I don't really think it should be framed in that way. I think, if anything, that's the best way to deal with a problem like this, is to throw government resources to de-radicalize these kids, bring them into the fold, make them feel welcome, make them little Aussies that can go on and live happy, healthy lives away from this absolutely toxic ideology that they were basically born into. Because a lot of them are still quite young, and so I'm hoping there might be enough time to sort of really change that, because once they hit sort of teenagers and things, it becomes much more difficult to sort of deprogram the radicalization that they have. Because at the end of the day, we don't want radical Islam in Australia. There is no space for it here. And I think that's where a lot of people are really concerned. And I think that's why this has become such a hot debate politically. I like Tony Burke, the immigration minister, and Anthony Albanese are just, they've just got to cop this, unfortunately. There's nothing they can do legally speaking. Their hands are sort of tied, but they are going to continue to be blamed as if they wanted this to happen. So I kind of feel a bit bad for them in this sake, but also, that's the job. Because, there really isn't a mechanism, and I don't think there should be, quite frankly. And I know for a lot of people that may sound kind of disgusting, and look, some of our listeners may disagree with me, but at the end of the day, I think it's a much, much more slippery slope to have legislation where the government can decide, nah, we're just cancelling your passport and we're cutting you loose. I don't think that's what the government should ever do to Australian citizens. I think we have a responsibility for them. I think if there was a mechanism to strip them of their citizenship, I think they would have already done it.
But I think so too. And look, I'm going to, I'm going to agree with you. I think Albo and Burke are in a very difficult situation on the morally side. They're a clear-cut situation legally, but you're right. Anything gets people will say, as you said, there's an implicit, you're wanting this to happen. But I happen to be on their side with the bureaucratic process.
Yeah, and look, incredibly frustrating. And again, I think people are, you're right. I think there is that implicit, you wanted this if you didn't stop it. And it's like, that's kind of a bit unfair. Like, you can disagree with their policies, but I think that is a bit unfair. But look, I think we're going to have to watch this space, as I always say, and just see how this develops. Hopefully we never hear anything about this ever again and it all just quietly goes away. But somehow I don't think that's going to happen. All right, let's move on. It's time for This Week in Australian History.
This week in Australian history, we're covering the 15th to the 21st of May. May 15th in 1989, Bond University, the first private university in Australia, opens.
Named after James Bond.
Yeah, that's right. Named after James Bond. That's exactly correct. That's the first thing you learn when you... hang on. It was established by businessman Alan Bond. Yeah. And it pioneered private higher education in Australia. So not everyone's a big fan of Bondy for lots of reasons. But he did open the floodgates on that one. May 16th in 1954, world champion boxer Jimmy Carruthers retires, and he was Australia's first world bantamweight champion. 1956, the first post-war British nuclear tests begin in Australia with Operation Mosaic at Montebello Islands in Western Australia. And for those people who haven't heard it, there was a four-part series.
Six-part series.
Six-part. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Wow, that's right. Extensive six-part series by DK in our Two Ticks Town Talk series. And that'll come under Woomera.
This is where it starts,
Yeah, so look, I'll put a note to myself, but as always, if my memory fails me, just look up Woomera. That was a very interesting series. If you want to know more about, get a friendly narrative and some good information from your friendly co-host DK.
It's me.
May 17th, 1824, the Supreme Court of New South Wales is created by letters patent. 1928, the Royal Flying Doctor Service of Australia makes its inaugural flight from Cloncurry to Julia Creek, and that was done by the Reverend John Flynn, and that was the beginning of the world's first air medical service. I'm sure one of us covered that, didn't we? In a
I think think
it was
you
me, wasn't
did. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. That one, you're on your own. I can't remember that one. I'm sure I'll be able to find it somehow. But yeah, it's it. But anyway, 1996, Bob Bellier is appointed to the District Court of New South Wales, and he was the first Indigenous Australian judge. May 18th, dud date. Tried to find out a few interesting things, but you just get these dud dates. So that's been on the dud date now for a couple of years. Keep looking, but nothing yet. May 19th in 1861, Dame Nellie Melba. She was born in Richmond down here in Victoria, and one of the world's greatest opera sopranos. And she became an international superstar. 1942, the prototype CAC Boomerang, which is an Aussie designed and built fighter aircraft, takes to the air for the first time. That was the first fighter plane made here. 1948, federal government announced that Australian rail gauges would be standardised by 1951. So it was necessary because we basically had fragmented rail gauges all over the place. Unsurprisingly, it took many decades longer, but they basically got it done eventually. 1950, Cabinet agrees to send forces to aid the British during the Malayan emergency, and that was Australia's first post-World War II military involvement in Southeast Asia. Not the last, but the first one after that.
Got to stop those communists taking over Malaysia.
Yeah, well, those Malay people. So yeah, it was. Wasn't much I knew about. I didn't know much about it. I did have a little bit of a look at it, and I thought, oh, okay, that's something I didn't know about Malay and the people up there. So
very one-sided. 400,000 troops versus, I think they only had like less than 10,000 communists or something like that. It was very one-sided. But guerrillas, they make life very difficult. So,
it's a successful tactic. Still is.
Think that people might have learnt from the Malaysian emergency, but no.
Well, you would think so, but no. Doesn't go that way, unfortunately. Where are we? May 20th, 1941, the Battle of Crete involving the Australian 6th Division begins. 1997, a Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission report calls for an apology for an early government policy of removing Aboriginal children from their parents and placing them in institutions, and that apology was later delivered by Prime Minister Kevin Rudd in 2008, 10 years later. May 21st in 1912, the steamship SS Kumbana sinks off Portler Headland during a cyclone, killing 126 passengers. 1962, the Commonwealth Electoral Act received assent, and that granted all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people the option to enrol and vote in federal elections. So that got rid of the last legal barriers that were there to Indigenous people voting in the federal elections. 1999, 8 bodies are found in barrels in a disused bank vault north of Adelaide, marking the beginning of the Snowtown murders case. So, yeah, one of Australia's worst serial killings, and it did shock the nation, but sort of like as time goes by, it becomes, sort of, as these horrible things do, they become more sort of, wouldn't say mythologised, but, the horrible nature of it works off, and it becomes sort of a fascinating thing for people.
There was a very good movie about it. I think it's called Snowtown, actually.
I think yep.
Yeah, it is. It's called Snowtown. Very full on. I wouldn't recommend it. I think it is R-rated, but it's very good film.
Yep.
But be prepared because they don't pull any punches. It's it's full on.
No, it's very raw. It's it's a really well done film. But yeah, look, if you're a bit sensitive to things like that, it will definitely not be your film. So no. If you're a bit like that, just cross off list. Don't bother going down there because no, it's not. It's not a nice film. But if that sort of stuff is in your wheelhouse, it's really well done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Finally, on 21st of May 2019, the LIGO Virgo gravitational wave detectors picked up a signal called, as we all know this, GW190521, and it was the most massive black hole merger ever directly observed at the time. So the event involved two enormous black holes, roughly 85 and 66 times the mass of the sun, smashing together to form an intermediate black hole. And it was a big deal because it filled a long-standing mass gap in black hole theory. And it answered a lot of questions and raised a few questions as well. But there are Australian scientists from Ausgrav involved in that. It was a bit of an international thing. I think it was, I don't know why I haven't got down there, but I think the equipment and that might have been over in somewhere in the US. I could get in fact, I won't say where the equipment was because I haven't got that noted down. But Australian scientists from the ARC Centre of Excellence for Gravitational Wave Discovery that had people from the Australian National Uni of Western Australia and others, and they were major collaborators in the project. So it was a widely covered breakthrough in that field and genuinely exciting. So it was. It made it to a lot of mainstream media as well.
It did, yeah. There's a lot of research in space stuff that is very exciting. It feels like. It feels like we've discovered everything on Earth. I know that's not quite true, but it does feel like that. And then we discover new things like that, and it's like, whoa, hey, science, it's still happening. I feel like so often with the history stuff, we feel like we're outside of history, but we're not. It's still happening.
Yeah, well put. So it finishes off this week in Australian history, and I'm guessing that those scientists drank an astronomical amount of wine and beer that night. All right, that sound, as we all know and love, takes us into the Forex bottle top quiz. And this week we're doing Communications in Australia Part 2. As foreshadowed. Well, not as foreshadowed, basically as planned. So, when was Australia's first regular television broadcast? And I'm going to say emphasis on regular, one that's, was regular, so not when they sort of experimented with it.
I'm trying to think when the first. I feel like this has come up in Australian history a couple of times. I'm trying to think of the history of just television, because it seems like with a lot of this sort of stuff, Australia, we're sort of a few years behind, but we're not. It's not like super delayed, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, oh no, we're 10 years behind for some reason. And most of the time it's just because this country is absolutely bloody huge and it's hard to roll out new technologies outside of like little pockets. So when television, I'm trying to think when television was first like became a mainstream thing. Do you know what?
Yeah, that's the way to think about this question.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think. I don't think television. I don't even know when television, like the technology, was invented. It was probably in like the 20s or something, but I don't know. I'm trying to think when my grandfather, he said that he got a television in the it must have been the mid-50s, but I don't think there was much to watch. You know, it was only on for like a couple of hours, a couple of days a week or something like that. Mm-hmm. So that was probably a similar time to when it became like a thing in Australia, I'd imagine. So I'm going to just say, I don't know, 1958.
Oh, look, it was 1956, September 16th. So I'm going to give that, well reasoned out as well. I like that. It was Channel 9, TCN 9 in Sydney. And that set it off. So that's why I said the regular broadcast when it was, and that was Bruce Gingell opened it with the words "Good evening and welcome to television."
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
I feel like that would. It's such a chicken and egg type situation, right? Like you can invent the technology of the television, but until you're broadcasting, it's kind of in a way that like radio is much more approachable than television because you have to film it. Like there's a lot more involved, you know? So it's like, it doesn't surprise me. It took a long time to really become a big thing.
Well, and just a bonus question on this first one. When did the first TV broadcast in Australia take place?
Oh, jeez. It was probably, if I think about like radio and how that went, it was probably like, for lack of a better term, like an experiment, or a demonstration is the word I'm looking for.
A demonstration's a way to think of it, yep.
Yeah. Probably like someone's come over and gone, look at this thing, and it's you plug in, I don't know, a camera or something. I have no idea how they would have done this, but and surprise, look, the picture's on the screen, or maybe it was just an image on the screen. Maybe it was that simple, a bit like Pong before, one of the first video games and how all that worked, where it was just like line on screen and everyone's like, whoa. It was probably something like that. And the thing is I have no idea because I don't know when television was invented.
Well, funnily enough, you almost like when you were reasoning through your other one, you pretty much came close to answering it.
Oh, so it must have been in the 20s then. All right, so I'll just guess, I don't know, 1920. What did I say before? 1920, 1958. I'll say 1928. Was it 30 years before?
I'm going to give it to you, 1929.
1929. So, wow, that's so early. That's such a big gap.
I know. Yeah, well, when you were saying that, I think, maybe I thought, wow, he's going to, and you did nail the bonus question.
Wow. That is incredible. I kind of want to know what they demonstrated now. Like, what was it? What did they show? What was the demonstration? I might look into that. Do you know?
I don't know what that particular one, but they did do, where'd they go? In 18 months of testing, they did do regular broadcasts of things like news headlines and still pictures and silent movies. Because I suppose once you can do that, anything you can feed into the transmitter.
Mm.
Yeah.
And again, it's like you need to have the technology ready for mass adoption. So there would have been probably, maybe universities or like radio stations, and I'm assuming it was radio stations that started broadcasting this stuff first. Industry guys that may have a television set in their office or whatever, sending things back and forth. There would have been a lot of infrastructure that would have had to be built out, I'd imagine. And then you have to get people to buy TVs, right? Which I know seems silly today, but like this was new technology, and they were big and they were heavy. Like, it was expensive. And what do I need that thing for? There would have been a bit of pushback from a lot of salty old dudes that don't want to waste their money on this newfangled technology. I feel the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So well done again. Question number 2. In the late 1890s, Australia achieved a world-leading per capita milestone in telegraphy. Telegrams. What was it?
The only thing that jumps to mind, what's the thing we have over everybody else? We're huge and we are very spread out. So I'm imagining, is it something to do with distance? We've got the most long distance telegraphs in a day or something like that. Is it something to do with distance?
No, it's not, but I like where you're going with that.
Oh, I don't know then. Do we have?
But you could loosely tie it to that, but it's not a distance thing.
So is it? Did we love sending telegraphs to each other? Were we sending more telegraphs than anybody else?
Yeah,
Is that what it was?
That's it.
We're so chatty.
Per capita, we sent more telegrams than any other per person, more telegrams than any other nation in the world. So,
that's cool. Yeah, that's cool though. We were like, yep. Well, do you know what? That probably does tie to the distance a little bit. Like, we're separated from these people, but we've got telegraphs now, so we'll send them a telegram. Yeah.
You're probably not old. Did you ever receive a telegram, or have you ever seen a telegram?
I have seen a telegram. I've never been sent a telegram, and they do still exist. And they are quite often they're used for like legal receipts, kind of, is a better way to think about it.
Right.
In contracts law, there are certain means of communication that, legally speaking, are like a binding contract type way to do it. And telegrams are one of them, sending a telegram to someone. And so as a result, sometimes telegraphs are still used today, which feels so antiquated. I didn't know that. Yeah.
I didn't know you could still send a telegram.
You can, very specific circumstances, you can send a telegram. But they're becoming fewer and far between these days. So I would love for someone to send me a telegram. And I feel like there possibly is like a novelty telegram service, but I don't know if that's true.
I'd be astounded if there wasn't, but
yeah, that feels like a bit of fun, doesn't it? I'll send you a telegram.
Yeah.
Just because.
Yeah, no, I do recall, like, very young, seeing telegrams a couple of times, and it was something that it was so sort of like, even by that stage, it was, a bit sort of like, it was special because it was telegram, but it was, by that stage it was sort of coming to the end of that. But it was still something that, no one would have said, oh my God, that's incredible. I thought that had gone out long ago. It was just sort of like, things are moving on from there. But yeah, I do remember seeing a couple of them. So yeah.
It is cool. Like it is. Yeah. It's I don't know. It's one of these antiquated things. I'm glad we've moved on.
Oh, yeah.
But it's still kind of cool,
Yeah. Exactly. All right, your final question is, when was Australia's first telephone service launched?
Ooh, I feel like you've said this in This Week in Australian History. But, oh man, telephone. See, because like obviously talking about telegraph. When was that? The 1890s. So telephone must have been. I immediately my mind just goes like the 1920s, but this feels like it could have been like early, like maybe there must have been an overlap with telegraph and telephone, right? But when was there a
Again, you're
big
thinking
enough?
correctly, yeah.
Yeah, when was there a big enough telephone network to like be what you would call, quote unquote, like mainstream, I guess, right?
I'll give you a little bit of a hint because that you're thinking about will be part of the bonus question. So it's, and I'll state that it's not the first public telephone exchange, but it's the first telephone service.
Because I feel like it would have probably started, like a lot of the stuff, like it would have been rolled out in the major cities, probably just within a city, I'd imagine, to start with. You know, you can call across town, and that would have been, oh my gosh, I can talk to dope blogs across town instantaneously. The future is here. And then it would have gone.
And it was.
Yeah, well, to be fair, that was. You know?
Yeah, to be fair, that's exactly what it was. The future had arrived.
And then it would have, it would have expanded from there. The question is, was it Sydney or Melbourne would have had the first one? I don't know. I guess it probably happened simultaneously. And then it would have been connected again further afield. I don't know how that rollout of that technology would have happened, but I can imagine Sydney and Melbourne would have been a priority to link via telephone, and then further afield and possibly even to across the Tasman to New Zealand and probably on to Singapore and stuff like that. So connect the world to Australia.
It was Melbourne. Yep.
It was Melbourne that was first. Oh, that is interesting. I guess. Oh, do you know what?
And as you said, as you suspected, it was within the city.
That is a bit of a clue, I suspect, because Melbourne during the gold rush was the most wealthy the most wealthy city in the entire world. So that makes me think it was before 1900 if it was Melbourne, and I'm going to guess, I don't know, it was like 18... Oh, how far back do I want to go? I can't remember when the gold rush was. I think it was like the 1850s, 1860s. I'll say 1880s. Melbourne's getting its first phone.
Oh, look, I'm going to pretty much give that to you. July 1879. Now that was a private, that was a private point-to-point line connecting the Melbourne and South Melbourne offices of the Robertson Brothers or Robertson Brothers engineering firm with their factory. So they sort of had an office.
So it was very privately owned, like.
The first one, exactly. The first one was private owned. We're literally running a line, and then which you can imagine them thinking, well, I can just instantly find out what's going on in the factory. Yeah. Unsurprisingly, other people said, "Oh, we want that," and you started to get a whole lot of these private firms running things like that. But that takes us to our bonus question for 3B, I suppose. When and where was Australia's first public telephone exchange opened?
Ooh, that's so much more difficult to guess. So if it was, what did you say? 1879 was the first private.
Yep.
Public. I feel like it wouldn't be that far behind. I feel like it would have been maybe, I don't know, within, let's say 5 years later. So let's say 1884. There's got to be a public.
Good reasoning. Basically within a year, August 1880 in Melbourne. And
Wow.
because you can imagine being that business and suddenly, look, you imagine rocking up to their
It's like
office.
magic. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, how's that order going? Just let me check with the factory. What do you mean? I'm going to call them on this device.
Yeah.
Oh, your order is going to be in, next week. That's ridiculous. And then going back to their business and saying, why don't we have that between here and there? And
Of course,
I suppose it was one of the things that it essentially sold itself. Because you see that action and you think, how could you not do it any other way?
It is one of these technologies that from point to point, it's actually not that complicated. I know I'm kind of trivializing it to a point, but and remembering, of course, we're talking the 1880s, right? So, but in terms of once someone's come up with it, now it's just a manufacturing process, right? So
it's
as
an
long as
engineering problem.
Yeah. So didn't you say it was an engineering firm that first did it?
Yeah.
There you go, right? They're like, we can make this. We know how to make this cable. That's probably the hardest part, really.
Yeah.
And then from point to point, a telephone from one end to the other with no exchange in between is actually very simple. Kids have been doing it with string and cups for years, which I know it's not quite the same thing, but it kind of is.
In principle, it is.
In principle, it is, yeah. Yep. So I can understand how very quickly everybody wants one of these, the magic phone. You can talk to the other person on the other end. Yeah.
Bloody oath.
Wow, within a year.
Exactly. Within a year, and it took off.
I can't believe how early that is. I would have my thoughts were thinking like turn of the century. It's probably early 1900s or something. But when you said Melbourne, I was like, Sydney only loses to Melbourne during the gold rush, so it's got to be then. It's got to be then.
Your reasoning was on target again, DK.
I got lucky there. It was a guess.
You have a lot of lucky guesses then.
Well, they're within a certain time frame, reasoned out. It's because I love history so much. So,
well, there you go.
Thank you so much for joining us for another Australia Talks. If you have any feedback or suggestions for topics, please get in touch with us on our email at australiatalks@proton.me. We'd also be grateful if you could subscribe and give us an honest review, as this helps us out immensely. But the best thing you can do to support the show is share it with a friend that you think might enjoy it. Otherwise, join us next week for another episode of Australia Talks. And thank you for listening. And as always, don't forget to tell your mum I love her.
Thank you, DK. I'm going to look up and see if I can book a flight to Sandy Island. I hear it's not particularly crowded at this time of year.
Beautiful weather right here.
Yeah, a bit wet.